again in session.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. On Dr. Murray's case, the defendant, Dr. Murray, is present with counsel as before. The people by counsel as before. All jurors and alternates are present. Everybody, good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. At this time, the defense will present its argument. Mr. Chernoff, thank you. Thank you.
I want to join Mr. Walgren in thanking you for the 6 weeks that you've spent here. That's certainly above and beyond the call of duty, and I noticed you took more notes than we even did, and I appreciate that.
I can't hear you now.
I'm sorry about that, and I appreciate that. I bet you're wondering how I'm going to address that argument. And I'm going to tell you very simply this. Mr. Walgren's argument is exactly why in this country we have the right to a jury trial. Because no matter what a prosecutor, whatever misleading or inaccurate things a prosecutor says, in this country, it's the jury that gets to take the evidence back. It's the jury that gets to take a look at the evidence, and it's the jury that gets to analyze the charge. Now, Mr. Walgren says in his says there's a reason why, let me see, he tells you, we don't have to go into the nature of propofol, he tells you. You know enough about propofol. We won't talk about that. There's a reason why he said that. He gives you bits and pieces of statements from witnesses. He doesn't give you the whole context of the statements, and he doesn't have you listen to the whole statement. You get to do that. And there's a reason why he didn't do that. Most disturbing of all, he tells you that he doesn't have to prove a direct and causal connection to the death of Michael Jackson when prosecuting Dr. Murray. That's the most disturbing thing, because that's exactly what he has to do. And what the law says specifically, what it will tell you is, there may be more than one cause of death. An act or a failure to perform a legal duty causes the death only if it is a substantial factor in causing the death, not that all it has to be is a substantial factor. You have a full charge that discusses that, and we're going to go through that. Now, as Mr. Walgren's telling you that, he told you about what a wonderful entertainer Michael Jackson was, and he was. We all know that. And about how hard this is on his family. Of course it was. And how bad a doctor Dr. Murray was. And he tells you how Dr. White used to be a good scientist. But what he forgets to tell you, what he absolutely thoroughly doesn't tell you, is that the prosecution during these 6 weeks have absolutely failed to prove a crime. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Sorry, we did this yesterday, so please bear with me. I'm learning how to do it. So, which one? All right. Mr. Walgren spent an hour and a half talking about negligence. And we told you on opening statement, I told you that we would not be disputing negligence. We would not be telling you that Dr. Murray didn't make any mistakes. We would never say that. And throughout this case, we never did, and we're not doing it now. But this case that you're deciding, it isn't a medical board hearing. This isn't a civil lawsuit. This is not about money. It's about liberty. And for a crime to be proved, you also have to show that Dr. Murray, the prosecution has to show that Dr. Murray actually killed Michael Jackson. And during his argument, the only thing he addressed to even get close to that, and I'm going to explain why in a bit, was baggy pants. Not only does Mr. Walgren have to show criminal negligence, he has to show that the specific act, and you have to be unanimous on this, the specific act that he says is criminally negligent, and there's some that aren't, was the cause. Was the cause, and you have to be unanimous on that. Otherwise, this isn't a crime. The medical board may address it. That's a possibility. But we're here because this has been charged as a crime. I want to talk to you about unchangeable, undisputed facts first. And this has to relate to the character and nature of propofol. And you're going to see why it's important. And I want to show you these facts first. This is a timeline that we can rely on. Now, Mr. Walgren told you all about phone calls that were made, and he implied that things were going on during that time without proving anything. What we do know is this for sure, that Dr. Murray found Michael Jackson not breathing, found him in distress at 12 noon. Now, you may think Dr. Murray's a sinner. You may think Dr. Murray's a saint. But for whatever reason, whatever you think of him, if all he cared about, which I believe, all he cared about was Michael Jackson and the safety of Michael Jackson, the very first thing he's going to do when he finds him not breathing and potentially dead is try to revive him. That's the first thing he's going to do. If you think he's a sinner, if that's what you think, then just to save his own neck, just to make sure that his meal ticket is set up. But for whatever reason, that is an unchangeable fact that Dr. Murray is going to immediately try to revive him. Now we know, and you can't really see that, but let me tell you what it says. We know that at 11:51, Sade Anding received a phone call from Dr. Murray. And we know, according to Sade Anding's testimony, that she listened for about 2 minutes before hanging up. That puts this at noon. Dr. Murray, during the period of time from 11:18 to 12 noon, was on the phone. During that period of time, from 11:18 to 12 noon, he was on the phone. If he had found Michael Jackson during that period of time, then what would have happened with Sade Anding is exactly what would have happened anywhere within that period of time. During those 42 minutes, from 11:18 to 12 noon, Dr. Murray would have been off the phone trying to revive Michael Jackson. So what do we know? We know that from 11:18 to 12 noon, Dr. Murray never found Michael Jackson not breathing. Now, he could have been on the phone next to him. He could have been emailing next to him. He could have been in the closet. He could have been in the foyer. But one thing we know for sure is he never found Michael Jackson not breathing for those exact 42 minutes. When you look at the nature of propofol, what you know, unchangeable facts from the experts, is that propofol is a 10-minute drug by injection. If you don't merely give an injection, let's say you have a procedure that takes longer than that, then the only way to keep propofol actually working is through a drip. That's the only way to do it. Now we know that propofol only can be administered either by IV injection or IV drip. We know that because Dr. Schaefer and Dr. White both investigated the possibility of oral propofol. So here's what we know. We know that if prior to 11:18 a.m., Dr. Murray had given an injection, just like he told the police, if prior to that time, Dr. Murray had given an injection any time within those 28 minutes, just like he told the police, then by the time he left at 11:18, as long as we're talking 10 minutes, 11:08, 11:03, or anything before that, and remember he said 10:50, and you will notice that from the phone records, the time he said he gave the injection, he was off the phone. If that's what Dr. Murray did, just like he told the police, then by 11:18, no matter what he was doing, no matter what, there was absolutely no danger. There was no chance of harm to Michael Jackson based on what Dr. Murray knew he gave Michael Jackson. That's indisputable. Because of that, because the prosecution knows that, they spent 6 weeks trying to prove a drip. Because without a drip, then what Dr. Murray gave Michael Jackson absolutely would not have harmed him without an unusual and intervening circumstance. And so they spent 5-6 weeks discussing a drip. Now you will note that all of the things that Dr. Schaefer said in his testimony, the prosecution didn't mention to you. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about all the things that occurred during Dr. Schaefer's testimony, during Alberto Alvarez's testimony, during Elisa Fleek's testimony. They didn't talk to you about that. Because they know that during that period of time, during those witnesses, it became clear that what the prosecution was doing, what they were attempting to do, was to create a drip that never existed. And they absolutely refuse to accept the most obvious and reasonable explanation for all of this, that Dr. Murray actually gave Michael Jackson exactly what he said he did. And the reason they refuse to accept it is because they won't tell you what they really want. They want you to convict Dr. Murray for the actions of Michael Jackson. They just don't want to tell you that. So they give you all these, well, check out the baggy pants. That's for you to decide. But they just won't tell you what they really want. I want to show you the genesis of the prosecution's drip. Mr. Waldron says in opening statement, whether or not this was followed by a continuous drip is for you to decide. He never goes out on a limb on this. And then comes Alberto Alvarez. Now, Alberto Alvarez sat on this chair and with tears welling up in his eyes, told you that it has been so hard for him, so difficult since the death of Michael Jackson. He can't get employment, he tells you. Oh, sure, he's had a couple of celebrity clients, and he's ashamed to say that he's sold on that basis. The agency sells him on that basis. He tells you that it's just been so hard, and then you learn that Alberto Alvarez has been offered $500,000 for his story. Now, how did Alberto Alvarez go from a story that's worth $9,000 to a story that's worth $500,000? Because you know from Kai Chase testifying that that's what her story was worth when all she did was see Dr. Murray up on the stairs. So how did that happen? How did it happen that Alberto Alvarez, when he first spoke to the police on June 20